Hello, welcome back. It is so good to see you. And if you're new here, it's really nice to meet you. I'm Monty, and on this channel, we talk about all things science fiction and fantasy, especially when there's a little bit of romance involved. Today, we are going to have a romance, erotica type conversation on this channel, a little bit of an opinion piece by me. Let me explain. So there is another YouTube creator who has a pretty substantial audience and who I will not be naming that likes to do Instagram Q&As. And I applaud her for that because my gosh, I do not have the energy to do half of the audience interaction she does. But one of these Instagram Q&As, she was asked a question about erotica fiction. And she was asked whether she thought it was cheating to read erotica. So I was kind of made aware of this through friends that saw the Instagram Q&A, and I was able to take a look at it on Twitter. Yes, MJ, I failed. Before the end of the month, I cracked because of this. But I did go ahead and look at it on Twitter, and I'd just like to take a look at the question, kind of, but more so her answer and her reasoning by her answer. And then I'd like to give my opinion on this and a little bit of the reason why I have my opinion. So I did give this a lot of thought after I initially saw it. And I kind of just want to go through it. There's going to be a couple of tangents. I always go on these kind of tangents. So I'm going to try to make this short. But you know what? Let's just get into it. Okay. So right here, is the Instagram Q&A question. So someone asked, reading erotica equals cheating. Being in love with your ex while being in a new relationship equal not cheating. Now, first off, we're going to just go ahead and ignore that whole second part of that question because here's the first little tangent. I don't think it's any of my business. And one of the things I've learned in my 43 years of life is that relationship dynamics from the outside can look many different ways. And unless you're a part of that relationship, you don't know what's really going on a lot of the time, and you don't know how that relationship functions. So, my general rule of thumb is to keep my nose out of other people's relationships. The only time I make an exception for that rule, of course, is if it's not consensual. Not everyone, there's some power dynamics involving age. So if one member's not of age, and of course, if there is abuse or violence involved in the relationship, then of course, I think it is everyone's responsibility to speak up, say something, do something. Other than those, however your relationship is structured, whatever works for you in your relationship is really none of my business because I'm not in your relationship. I'm not in your bed. And I think that's just a really great way to live. So we're going to ignore that second part. But the first part does say reading erotica equals cheating. Now, here is that YouTuber's response. Reading erotica with the intent to get turned on when I am right there and can turn you on myself is sexual betrayal, which is cheating to me. It makes me feel like I'm not good enough. If you have to turn to a book and not me, then I'm obviously not enough. Okay, so I'm just going to say right now that my opinion on reading erotica, does reading erotica with the intent of being turned on, does that equal cheating? My opinion differs from this person's. However, that does not mean I think that her opinion is crazy or out in the field or wrong. So, let's look at her response. I think there's really two parts to this response. The first part is definitely her stating her opinion on the matter. And she does make clear that it's her opinion because she says right here, to me, which, look, I'm not a scholar of rhetoric or anything, but when someone says, well, to me, that in my brain translates, in my opinion, per my perception. So the first part is her opinion. And then the second part is really her giving reasons why she feels that way. So let's look at that first part real quick. So she says, reading erotica with the intent to get turned on when I am right there and can turn you on myself is sexual betrayal, which is cheating to me. So there's the first part. There is her opinion. Now, of course, this creator did not state whether it was just erotica fiction or if that would also expand out to romance. And we all know that I don't read a ton of erotica. However, I do read romances where I believe there are erotic elements in there. There are definitely explicit love scenes in the romances I read, and those are the romances I prefer. And to me, and like I said, this is in my opinion, my perception, to me, erotica really is the writing of sexual fantasies. Now, the romances I read are kind of, an overview, a story of the relationship between the people involved. But they most often do contain explicit sexual fantasies within those stories. So I can't ask this YouTuber, this creator, if she would also apply this to, let's say, romance books that have that explicit uh, graphic love scenes in them, if that would still apply. But I'm gonna make the assumption that yes, that would also kind of apply to this. And if I'm wrong, that's fine. This is just speculation and an assumption. So what she's really saying is that if you go seek out media, in this case, erotic fiction, erotica, and your intent in seeking this out is to become aroused, then she views that as sexual betrayal, which is to her cheating. Here's my thoughts on her opinion on this. I say valid. That is her opinion, and I think that she has every right to that opinion. And the reason why I think that is because when you're in a relationship, you can set boundaries with your partner. And if one of the boundaries you set is, hey, reading erotic fiction to become aroused to me feels like cheating, and your partner agrees to that, that's a boundary you've set in your relationship. Therefore, if your partner does go read erotic literature to become aroused to then come and have intimate time with you, that would be a betrayal. So I think that's completely valid. And if you agree with this, I think you'll be like, yes, of course, I agree. If you do disagree, look at it this way. In every relationship, like I said, we have boundaries, right? What we think is acceptable for our partner to do, what we think is acceptable for us to do. And you could kind of just like ripple this out. Some people may say, okay, well, reading erotic literature to get aroused is fine. But if you were to view, let's say, pornography to become aroused to then have intimate time, that would be beyond my boundary of acceptable. And therefore, if you did that, I would find that to be a betrayal. And some people, taking that further out, all the rest is fine. But, if you were to go to, I hate calling them this, but strip clubs to see exotic dancers with the intent to become aroused, then I see that as a betrayal. And you can go ahead and continue to think on that and think about different relationship dynamics, what they find acceptable and what they don't. So I think when we're thinking about something like this, you really have to take into consideration each relationship is unique. The dynamics of a relationship is unique, and how you set up those boundaries with your partner is really what classifies what betrayal is in your relationship. And as long as this creator has had that conversation with their partner and said, hey, look, this is what I consider, and the partner's, this is what I consider betrayal, and the partners come back and said, yeah, I can totally see where you're coming from. I agree to this. Cool. It works for them. Therefore, valid opinion. Valid stance to have on this topic. And I think if you look at the second part of the statement of her opinion, which I think is kind of the reason why she feels this way. She says, it makes me feel like I'm not good enough. If you have to turn to a book and not to me, then I'm obviously not enough. So first off, it's very succinct, but it also shows a lot of vulnerability. Obviously, being able to arouse one's partner is one of the facets of how she views and values herself, right? It's a self worth thing, which I think is very fair. And once again, you can take that and apply it to that whole, ripple I kind of uh, example I used before, and say, if my partner went to see exotic dancers in order to get aroused, that could hurt my self worth. It could make me feel not worthy. So, however you play it. So I think that that is a very valid reason behind saying this is why see this as betrayal. And I absolutely, even though my opinion is different than this creator's, I can see where they're coming from. And I can say 100%, yeah, it's a valid opinion and it's a valid stance to have. Now, let me give you my opinion. All right. For me, reading erotic literature, whether it's in the context of a romance book or just erotica on its own, do I consider that cheating? Would I consider that if I did that cheating? Would I consider it if my partner did that cheating? No, absolutely not. I the boundaries in my relationship dynamic definitely would not prohibit that. And here's why. For me personally, as I've said before, I grew up in Utah. I've lived most of my life in Utah. I have lived outside of the state, but most of my life was spent in Utah, and definitely my formidable years, so the years when I was younger, before I became an adult, the majority was spent in Utah. And Utah has a culture, I'm going to say it, of sexual repression. And especially for women, it is very taboo to talk about sex. It's very taboo to talk about sexuality. It's very taboo to talk about any of those things. And that's the overall culture. That's not just if you grow up with in the majority religion here, which I did not. But even then, because the culture is and your peers are like this and everyone around you is like this, you simply don't discuss these things. You don't talk about it. And if you are someone who does talk openly about sex, sexual experiences, sexual questions, you are viewed in a very certain light, as at least when I was younger. And we all know I went to high school in the late 90s. So times may have changed. I don't talk to high school kids that much, so who knows? But back then, you definitely were never going to talk about any of that. And even as an adult, there's not a lot of open discussions amongst me and my friends about this. You know what I mean? It's just something that's not done here. So when I really started reading romance, romance books, especially when I kind of got into the romance books that had a little bit more of the erotic and erotica flavor in them, it was eye-opening for me, right? But it also was a very safe way for me to explore different aspects of sex, sexual fantasies, and allowed me to explore it in a very contained, controlled environment, and to really see what, made me blush, made me feel a little bit something. And therefore, I was able to figure out kind of like what I gravitated towards, what I really didn't gravitate towards, and then in communication with my partner, explore more of that. So to me, I find it to be more of a tool rather than a vice, if that makes sense. And to me, really, the purpose of romance books, when they do have the more graphic love scenes, is to make the reader feel a certain way. That's why they write those scenes. When you read the relationship part, yeah, for a moment, kind of through escapism, you are living vicariously through the characters throughout their relationship. You get to see them meet cute, see their struggles, see how they overcome it. But when you read romance fiction where there is like graphic love scenes in them that are more on the erotica side of things, yeah, I think the author's intent is to make you feel a certain way. So, in my opinion, it's actually helped me understand myself more, have more of an awareness of my sexuality and my sexual preferences than I did before I read romance. And I did ask Mr. B, I did ask him if he thought that it was cheating if I was reading erotic literature and I was aroused and then, you know, wanted to spend some time with him. And his answer was simply absolutely not. But that's because that's the dynamic we have set up in our relationship. We do have our boundaries, which I'm not going to go into here, but we do have our boundaries as every couple or any relationship, however that relationship is organized, should. And that's absolutely not one of them. And like I said, my opinion on this is definitely based on how romance has helped me, how it has in many ways healed me and allowed me to overcome the stigma that I grew up with and that carried over into so much of my adult life. So, therefore, that's why my opinion differs. Now, I think that if you agree with the creator that made this statement, like I said, I think your belief and your opinion is absolutely valid. Even though I disagree with it for myself, does not make your opinion any less valid for you. Now, like I said, I'm not going to mention this YouTuber by name um, because honestly, I don't want to send anyone over to her platform and her channel to say anything and argue or whatever. I doubt anyone in my audience would ever do that, but I've seen it happen before. If you do know who this is, please don't go hate or anything on their channel. I'm using my public platform to state my opinion. And if she ever does see this video, I hope that she can watch it and say, okay, cool. That's how she thinks and that works for her. Cool. I think differently. Cool. Anyway, so let me know down in the comments below. Do you consider reading erotica to be cheating? Does it matter if it's with the intent to become aroused or not? Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to know your thoughts on this. I think this is, personally, I thought that this was such an interesting topic that I just wanted to add my piece to it and my reasoning for why I believe the way I do. But let me know down below what you think. And if you did like this video, do consider giving me just a little bit of love on this channel. You can go ahead and give me a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more from me, you can always hit that subscribe button. That way you'll always know when I upload next. And until next time, take some time for yourselves and love you. Bye.